Welcome to the Sacred Heart Share-A-Thon on the Carolina Catholic Media Network. Today, we are live on the air from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., asking for your financial support and sharing the great work of various ministries, authors, speakers, clergy, and local radio hosts that impact our local Charlotte community. Carolina Catholic Media Network is 100% listener supported, and we need your financial support to continue broadcasting the truth of Jesus Christ. Call 1-800-857-2909. That's 1-800-857-2909 to make your tax-deductible pledge. Operators are standing by right now to take your call, or you can donate online at carolinacatholicmedia.org. Thank you for your loyal listenership. We hope you enjoy this special Sacred Heart Share-A-Thon program.
Welcome back to the Carolina Catholic Media Network Sacred Heart Share-A-Thon Pledge Drive, coming to you live from the Carolina Catholic Media Network studio on North Tryon Street in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sacred Heart Share-A-Thon Pledge Drive is taking place today. We're wrapping up on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. Such a great timing and blessing. Again, phone number to call in or donate is 1-800-857-2909, and donations can be made online at carolinacatholicmedia.org. My name is Jason Murphy. I'm the host of the Obligation radio show here, playing each week on Fridays at 5. And we have a special guest coming on to join us for this hour. We've been broadcasting since Wednesday, and we will wrap up this evening at 6 p.m., raising money for Carolina Catholic Media to continue providing Catholic content throughout the Charlotte surrounding areas. We have a guest with us today who has been on my show a couple of times. We've talked. He has local ties here with parents currently living in Charlotte. He is the oldest of 10 children, ordained a priest in the Diocese of Knoxville in 2014. He served as a parochial vicar of the Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He is now the Associate Director of Courage International in Trumbull, Connecticut. Courage is an approved apostolate of the Catholic Church that counsels men and women with same-sex attraction in living chaste lives in fellowship, truth, and love. Courage members are men and women who experience same-sex attractions who have made a commitment to strive for chastity. They're inspired by the gospel call to holiness and the Catholic Church's beautiful teachings about the goodness and inherent purpose of human sexuality. Through Courage, people who experience same-sex attraction receive pastoral support in the form of spiritual guidance, community prayer, support, and fellowship. Without further ado, I'd like to bring Father Colin Blatchford back on. Father Colin, good to see you today. How are you?
Good morning. It's good to see you as well, Jason. I'm doing very well.
That's great.
Been on the road for a couple weeks, and now I'm kind of settling back in at home. So it's good to sit down and talk to you today.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. Been so much going on. In our world, in our church, and of course, there's these murmurs we've been hearing, and maybe we'll hear them today that Roe versus Wade might be reversed by the Supreme Court justices on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. We'll continue praying, and if not today, we'll continue that prayer. But many things going on. In a world that's seemingly lost, yet one of the greatest tragedies going on in our world. Abortion. The potential, out of nowhere, it seems that that this may be overturned, and our Lord, of course, always triumphs. But speaking of all the things going on in our world and all the mixed messages we get and things, we're in the month of June. Of course, we know as Catholics, it's the month of the Sacred Heart. But the world will have us believe that it is the month of Pride. Pride Month, and I thought, let's get straight to the authority on this. As far as a ministry to those who experience same-sex attractions and are working to conform their lives to Christ and the gospel. We thought, as you're your association, your ministry with Courage, you could help enlighten us. How does the Catholic Church perceive that? As far as Pride Month, let's get into it and hear what the Church says.
Sure. Well, I think first, before we can sort of speak to what the Church says about Pride Month, first we have to understand where Pride Month kind of comes from. The first sort of Pride parades and such started in large cities in the late '60s. The most famous, I think it's called Stonewall. It was in '69 in New York, when some police came to a gay bar and kind of arrested and broke things up, and there's fighting and people and rioting, and the individuals at the bar were treated very poorly, and so it started as a response to witnessing the police treating them with a lack of human dignity, which, when we look at what the Church teaches, the Church is 100%, on the side of supporting human dignity, right?
Absolutely.
That we are created in the image and likeness of God, that we have to be treated that way, right? That we can't be persecuted, and especially not, physically and verbally abused for it. That's, in fact, in 1986, responding to many of these sort of outcries about persecution and unfair treatment. The Church wrote a letter on the pastoral accompaniment of those with homosexuality. And it says it is deplorable that any should be treated without the respect for their human dignity, and that anybody who cooperates with this is committing a grave sin.
Of course.
And so, insofar as like this idea that somebody needs to be protected, that the dignity needs to be upheld, we're 100% with it, right?
Of course.
But what's happened very often, we've seen as sort of the pride parades have grown, is there's many with altering. There's many different sort of opinions and agendas when within these groups. Should we support human dignity? Absolutely. Even of people who have same-sex attraction and gender identity disorders? Of course. Does that mean that we should attend a pride parade? Well, what goes on there? I mean, sometimes it's there's those who are looking for real sexual license, and the slogans or the acts and the things that are going on can be very scandalous, especially for children, but even for adults. And so we have to keep that in mind. And so, like, what does it mean, to support that dignity as opposed to supporting the pride parade, right? And I think it goes back to something you said about kind of about Pride Month, or maybe it wasn't you. Father Baczynski mentioned it in his Pride Month, the Catholic response, which I think we'll include in the show notes. That pride is considered to be one of the deadliest sins, the greatest mother of all sins.
That's right.
So it's ironic, that they use that, but there's also a sense of indeed we must be proud of our dignity and uphold it, but that cannot therefore become a weapon for license, right? In that I can do as I please, that nothing stands above me. And I just wanted to mention, June indeed is the month of the Sacred Heart, in which we celebrate the fact that Christ had a human heart, that he experienced the emotions that we experience, that he experienced the longings that we experience for closeness and intimacy with others, for friendship, right? He experienced all these things, and he invites us into that with him. He asks us, right?
That's right.
To love with his Sacred Heart, to imitate him.
Yes.
In loving even the gravest of sinners wherever they are, and loving them enough to call them forward, right? And Dom Chautard, I think I'm saying that right, Chautard, in the Heart of the Apostolate,
Yes.
says that any of this activism that we do, any of these acts that we do where we seek to go and bring someone to God as we work as an apostle, right, evangelizing, must come from a deep and abiding interior life, relationship with Christ, especially his Sacred Heart. If we do not, then it will come to nothing. And a great witness to this is the patrons of Courage and Encourage. Our patrons whose feast is celebrated on June 3rd is Charles Lwanga and companions.
Okay.
Charles Lwanga and Joseph Debenke, I think I said that right. They were members of King Mwanga's court, squires, if you will, in the late 1800s, 1880, 1885. 1885 is kind of when it all came to a head. But in the court of King Mwanga, the missionaries would come and seek permission, and they couldn't go. This was in Uganda. They couldn't go and just go and preach, but they could preach to the people of the king's court. And so that was most of these young men, somewhere between the ages of like 14 and 30. Okay. And Joseph made sure that the boys were taught the gospel and were living a life of virtue. And he was calling them to virtue, and they were being educated in these things, and they were living very good lives. And the king died, and his son took over, and his son was more antagonistic. King Mwanga, was the son, and he threw the missionaries out. And his major domo, his chancellor, started to point out to the king that the young men of his palace gave homage to God and obeyed him over the king's commands. And Charles Lwanga and Joseph worked to protect the young men. The king he had a very strong sexual appetite. We might even say nowadays a sexual addiction. And he would try and lure the boys away with gifts and such, and sought homosexual relationships, acts with them. Wow. And Joseph and Charles protected the boys. And the major domo kind of got into the king's ear and said, well, are you the king or are you the king? Right? So about that it took a few years after he came to reign. So about 1885, Charles Lwanga, Joseph Debegke, and their companions, of which there are, I think, 18 of them or 20, were killed. And they were killed very brutally. Joseph was chopped to pieces, limb by limb, and left to die in a ditch. Many of them were burned alive. Charles Lwanga was burned alive. He actually asked his executioners if he could arrange the sticks so it would burn better. Wow. And then as he was burned, didn't even cry out except to praise the Lord.
Sounds like St. Lawrence.
Go ahead.
No, it sounds like St. Lawrence. Flip me over. I'm done on this side.
Yeah.
That's great.
And so all of this was around, and there was no hatred in this towards the king or anything. It was just a desire to be virtuous and to protect themselves. And so it's interesting that June sort of became this Pride Month when, in fact, historically we see it's the month of the Sacred Heart. It has been for a very long time. And then you also have Charles Lwanga and companions here at the very beginning of the month, witnessing in Uganda in the late 1800s. Wow. What it means to really and truly live the faith, even in the face of being persecuted. And that's something that we have to remember while we're in the midst of Pride Month as Catholics. We have to be able to be clear in the teachings of the church with charity, yes. Right? Great charity. If we don't have charity when we're doing these things, right? If we don't have kindness, then we're not really giving the truth.
Just a tinkling symbol, right?
Yeah. Because the truth, now those can reject, I shouldn't say we're not giving the truth. We're not giving it in charity, is what I meant to say. We have to do it with kindness. We have to do it with love, because in the context of the church's teaching, the church recognizes the emotions and the history and the experiences that people have had as important to who they are and how they see themselves, but then also says, yes, these are important, and we need to integrate those into who you are as a man, who you are as a woman, and then you need to be a saint, right?
That's such a beautiful story, and I think that just needs to be told out more so that people understand that, especially for those martyrs in particular and how they relate with Courage International as well. But I would say there's a lot of people out there. I would say most of secular world believes that Catholics simply hate homosexuals. And I was even in a conversation yesterday, and I was kind of explaining, Courage from that perspective, how they minister. And they're like, oh, well, that's horrible. So I guess they try to convert or reprogram these people, and that's horrible. How would you answer something? Someone said, oh, is that what courage does?
Uh, well, no, we don't actually offer any counseling at all whatsoever.
Okay.
What we do is they've lived however they've lived, and they come and they say, I have same-sex attraction or gender identity discordance, right? Like I experience these feelings and these desires, but I want to live my faith. That's what they tell us. So we're not saying, oh, you have to go do this or you have to go do that.
Right.
They've come to me and they've said, I want to live my faith according to what the gospel says.
Interesting.
I say, well, I'll help you.
Yeah.
Just as every priest does.
That's right.
And you see what many don't understand is they're not called to anything that anybody else in the church is not called to. Chastity is the integration, according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the integration, all right, of our sexuality within the person. So what does that mean? Those thoughts, feelings, desires that pertain to being man or woman, right, which would include sexual desires and lusts, but also the way in which we interact with people, must be healthily and harmoniously integrated within the person so that we can be free, right? If I have a thought that keeps coming into my mind and I can't integrate it into how I'm living, meaning it distracts me from life, it almost impels me or to act in a certain way, right? Then I'm not really free. The person who like myself, right? So I'm kind of a big guy. I struggle with like kettle chips. I love them. I see them. I almost cannot say no.
I like salty over sweet myself.
Yeah. But like I have to work on integrating that, right? Like that's not healthy bodily, right? It's like even the secular world would recognize that yes. We have to be careful about that. But also spiritually, it's not, right? Because I'm in a sense, not even in a sense, I am chained to the kettle chips, right? And I have to enter into mortification to break that chain. Yeah. I have to enter into suffering. I have to recognize that it is not about me. It is not about what I want. It's rather about God's will and how can I live that out in a healthy, holy, and free manner if I need to leave the chapel to go get some kettle chips, right? Like now that's extreme, but
so next time I see you, I need to keep the Cape Cods away from you, right? No Cape Cods. All right, sorry, I digress.
But I think it's a good example though, because sometimes we forget that a lot of these things are very much what we would call second nature or habituated, right? So the brain it tries to make things, if you will, mindless, right? Like it wants to integrate the complex actions that are necessary to accomplish a task, feeling good, let's say, into something it doesn't have to think about, right? So for instance, when, first learning how to get dressed, right? When you were little, right? Like that took a while to figure out that, but now, we're both here. We got our shirts on and our pants on, like we're groomed. I bet neither of us thought directly about that this morning though, because it's so integrated into who we are. Right. Now, if we do that with virtue, that's fantastic. That's how you become a saint. If we do that with vice, we can start to act in a way that is not in accord with our nature, that seeks out sin. And we don't even sometimes think about it. We don't even realize it, when you stub your toe and swear, right? Like, I don't know where that habit came from. Why do I do this? Well, it came from a habit of being free with our language when certain emotions come up. And then when that emotion comes up, boom, then the language comes. And so I think part of our response to Pride Month, right, can be Charles Luanga and the Sacred Heart, as Don Chachard says in the part of the apostolate, which is to become intentional about those things, right? To make serious mortification that we may be holy. Because if we're holy and if we understand what the church teaches about sexuality and God's plan for it and sexual pleasure, then we can encounter somebody and we can have the conversation with them that we need to have. And that's not necessarily, well, this is the sexual teaching of the church and you need to abide by it. Yeah. It might just be, Hey, how you doing today? I saw that smile on your face. I'm just wondering why you're so happy. You look like a happy guy.
Yeah.
Who is it that you love? Why do you love them? Do you feel loved? Right? Like how do these? It could be any conversation that we have. At that point, we become the instrument of God, and we remove ourselves from the equation, and great things can be done.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Once again, my name is Jason Murphy. I'm sitting down with Father Colin Blatchford from Courage International. We are in the midst of the Carolina Catholic Media Network Sacred Heart Share-A-Thon. You can call in now with your donation or pledge at 1-800-857-2909 or go online to carolinacatholicmedia.org. We will take as little or as much as you are able to help keep Catholic content on the air, online, and relevant in the Charlotte and surrounding areas. All donations are tax deductible. You know, Father, so some practical, practical things, because I think this is taboo. Homosexuality with Catholics it just is. It's taboo subject. Especially with the way that the abuses in the church, unfortunately, have been magnified and presented by the media, especially when we know that the percentage of these abuses as compared to other religions is far less, and even in non-religious environments is far less. Not to belittle any of the abuses because they're all horrible, but that being said, some practical things that maybe many Catholics struggle with, or dealing with right now, maybe listening right now and wondering, what if a situation where a child may exhibit certain homosexual tendencies and maybe by chance maybe even begin to act on those. How would a parent handle that? Because I know Courage is not just for those with the attractions; it's also for family and friends, and so support and probably questions like this that would come across. What if a child decides they want to act on those? A child decides to engage and then maybe get married, and then a parent is invited to a union of the child and their partner. How. Obviously, the parent loves the child. Obviously, the parent has to take a stance and say, I love you, but I cannot condone, what you're doing. Could a parent go, and I'm sure you've probably heard this question, can a parent go to a wedding or, a union between their child and their partner?
Well,
how would you handle that? What would be a good advice? I know that's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's a tough
So
one.
there are a lot of good resources. And Courage has them on our website, couragerc.org, and you can always call us as well.
Okay.
In relation to the particular question that you asked, as Catholics, we have to uphold the teachings of the Catholic Church, and we can't just do it in the form of kind of a distant neutrality, right? We can't just say, well, it's okay for them, but not for me. We also have to be bold and honest, but we always have to be charitable, right? Again, and so the parent who's in whose child has gone, is living waywardly and has invited them to the civil ceremony, clearly could not go because we believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and a Catholic who's getting married outside the sacrament, in which case they would here, you know, then we couldn't in good conscience go. But that would also be true for a child who's left the faith, is marrying someone of the opposite sex.
Of course, absolutely.
And is getting married outside the church,
absolutely.
Right? And so we have to keep that in mind. But we also don't want to. I think one of the reasons you said, very often Catholics. How did you phrase it in relation to the
kind of
teaching
taboo and
taboo? Yeah. Well, and I think that comes from the notion that Scripture has given us of the sins that cry out to heaven. Right. We don't want to belittle the sins. Like if Scripture says these are sins that cry out to heaven, then we need to ask why. And the Church has said it's because it goes against the very nature of who we are. So same-sex acts. We're not talking about people here, just the acts, right? Because the Church has said that the orientation, the desire for it itself is not sinful. It's merely a thought, right? Sure. It's a suggestion that comes from our fallen nature. And so that itself is not sinful, but to actually pursue the acts. Yes. They work against the very way that God has written into us how love, and marital love in particular, sexual love, is supposed to be expressed. How we're supposed to express ourselves as men and women, it goes against those very principles. And we could have a deeper conversation about that.
Yes.
And there's some good brochures on Courage's website that kind of talk more about that. But I think that's one of the reasons why it comes up as taboo. But then people forget that, the defrauding of widows and orphans, not giving a fair day's work for a fair day's wage. Right. So spending a bunch of time on social media while you're at work, those two cry out to heaven. Right. And I think we've kind of focused in on this one because it's, because it's sexual, right? Like it's particularly related to sex and desire and feeling loved. And we can recognize that even in the disordered action, that if we take out just the disordered action, what are the two people they're seeking? They're seeking intimacy, right? And physical intimacy is only one that we need. We also need emotional, social, spiritual, psychological, intellectual, and all of the other forms of physical that don't involve genital sexual contact, right? Like a hug, proximity, right? Like we need these regardless of our orientation and our desires. And if we're not getting those in every aspect of our life, right, or getting those met through the aspects of our life, our different relationships, because they're all met through relationships with people, then we're going to seek to find them elsewhere, or to use one form of intimacy that we're easily able to achieve more than others so as to cope with it, right? So I think that's one of the reasons that people get hung up on it, because it's easy to see how it's connected, I think.
Yes.
And maybe even, dare I say, it's easy for us to see how we too, right, have maybe used sexual pleasure for ourselves to receive that affirmation,
right,
and how we're maybe disappointed in ourselves for it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could be other things as well. It is other things as well. But I think that's one of the big ones.
Yeah, no, definitely a lot to cover, and like you said, it's something we probably could talk a lot more, and I'd love to have you back on the obligation, and we could really get into some of those details, because I think we don't ever hear about that. Really, we don't talk about it. We kind of assume things, and we, make these presumptions about what the church thinks and what we should do, and I think we either lean far one way or far the other, but there's a lot of details in between that I think need to be brought to surface. Especially speaking of the martyrs you brought and related them. As far as why they were martyred and why they are the patrons of courage. I mean, that's an amazing story. So if you'll have me again, I'll have you on, and I'd love to talk with you. I appreciate you coming on, especially during the pledge drive here. If folks wanted to come on, find out more about Courage, what would be the best route to find you guys?
Probably our website, www.couragerc.org. Couragerc.org. On there, we have the resources for individuals who are looking for meetings, or family members who are looking for support. And like I said, the meetings are I didn't say actually. The meetings are support groups, peer support groups for individuals who are seeking to live out their life and maintain good, healthy relationships. We have those all over the world. And then we also have, I have this question about this thing. We have some frequently asked questions, and my phone number, and the director of Courage, Father Bachansky's phone number, as well as some of our other members. The phone numbers are on there, so that's an easy way to get a hold of us.
Excellent.
Along with our emails.
Well, thanks so much, Father. It was great seeing you, and I do look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Jason, for having me, and I do too.
All right, God bless.
You are listening to the Carolina Catholic Media Network Sacred Heart Share-A-Thon. Operators are standing by right now to take your tax-deductible pledge. Call 1-800-857-2909. That's 1-800-857-2909. Or donate online at carolinacatholicmedia.org. We now rejoin network programming already in progress.